Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Boa tarde a todos. It's such an honor to be here today. I want to thank all my colleagues for the opportunity to engage with you, to learn from you. And of course, huge thank you goes to Professor Vanessa Grossman, Professor Catherine Sivit for the invitation and for organizing such a wonderful event. As you can see, I have titled my presentation, Navigating Displacements, Decolonial Resistance and Epistemological Ruptures in Verenilde Pereira's Rio Sem Fim. And I would like to begin by saying that I want to give this presentation the spirit of a letter. Of course, not in a formal sense, but in a utopian dimension. A letter as a message to the future, much like the Ricardo Piglia's character, Emilio Heinz, in the novel Respiración Artificial, Artificial Respiration. I say this because very soon, one of the most powerful actions in the history of the Amazon region, and not only, but of Brazilian literature as a whole, will finally receive its well-deserved recognition. Written as a part of a master thesis at the University of Brasilia, the novel Rio Sem Fim by Verenilde Pereira was published in September 1998 by a small publishing house in the Brazilian capital. The book was entirely financed by the author. However, for almost a quarter of a century, 24 years, the book remained largely unnoticed by the Brazilian press, the publishing market, literary critics, and consequently, the reading public. It was not until May 2022 when the Brazilian newspaper Folha de São Paulo published the article Verenilde Pereira, Verenilde, pioneira da literatura afro-indígena, Verenilde, pioneer of Afro-Indigenous literature, that readers could finally become aware of the book. The article in the Brazilian newspaper was my immediate reaction to the novel, which I had just discovered by pure chance and great luck. I am happy to say that the reaction to the article came right away. Few months later, Verenilde signed a contract with Alfaguara, an imprint of Companhia das Letras, Brazil's largest publishing house. Rio Sem Fim will be finally reissued. The new edition is expected to be published now in May of this year. And once the book is released, it will be translated into English by the award-winning translator, my good friend, Johnny Lawrence, with funding from the Brazil Lab at Princeton. John, just as information, Johnny was the one who translated the best-selling novel Torturado by Itamar Vieira Jr. into English. In English, it's Crooked Blow. It's important to say that I don't align with the notion of literature as an act of imposing form on the matter of a lived experience. Literature, as we know, goes far beyond that. I do, however, draw on Michel Houphouët-Trillow's reflections on the impossibility of fully understanding the value of a historical product without considering both the context of its production and its consumption. How seriously can we take this statement that there is no life beyond the text? Asks Trillo, recalling Derrida's famous statement, Il n'y a pas de hors texte. There is nothing outside the text. There is no outside text, as translated by Professor Gayatri Spivak. With this question, Trillo highlights the limits of historical interpretation and the relationship between text and reality, thus challenging the tendency of some theorists to treat the text as the sole source of meaning while neglecting the historical and social contexts of its production and its consumption. In this light, my reading of Rio Sem Fim not only examines the formal aspects of the book, but also critically engages with the social, economic, and political conditions that have shaped Verenilde's life and delayed the recognition of the novel within the Brazilian literary field for nearly 3 decades. The daughter of a black mother and an indigenous father from Satere Maué people, the Afro-Indigenous writer Verenildo Santos Pereira was born in Manaus, the capital of the state of Amazonas, in 1956. As a child in a poor family, she was exposed to the dynamics of conflict among many indigenous peoples who, displaced from the forest, faced marginalization in cities across of northern Brazil, a often yet frequently overlooked phenomenon. Still very young, Venenudi earned a scholarship to attend a prestigious and, of course, very expensive school in her hometown, all thanks to her talent for writing. In an interview with the Manaus newspaper Jornal do Comércio, the writer described her reality at the time. I quote, being of indigenous and black origin, and considering the context of the time, I was obviously placed, like thousands of others, in the sign of failure, of less than a person. Nevertheless, in a path where defeats, victories, failures, and achievements are present, I found in writing support and protection against the storms as one of the drivers of my life. In short, I am a person who also believes the language is capable of withstanding the extremes of the world. Close quotes. The strong educational foundation Verenilde acquired during her formative years would later enable her to gain admission to the journalism program at the Federal University of Amazonas. As we know, a rare opportunity for someone of her ethnic and socioeconomic background during the 1960s and 1970s in Brazil, and sadly still today. Her academic training and political activism would merge with journalism right out of college at Porantim, the first Brazilian newspaper dedicated exclusively to indigenous news. Seen by Venenilde as foundational to her literature, the intersection of journalism and activism, however, would lead her to the most dangerous days of her life. In June 1986, she traveled to the São Gabriel da Cachoeira region of northern Amazonas to investigate reports of illegal miners invading indigenous lands. Considered a threat, the local power brokers convinced a judge to order her arrest. Held in jail for 4 days, the writer knew that staying in the region would put her life in danger. After her release, to escape the region, she had to walk and run through the forest for 9 hours before she was able to secure a flight to Brasilia, where she still lives and where she would go on to write her Rio Sem Fim. In 1991, Verenilde Pereira was admitted to the master's program at the University of Brasilia. 2 years later, to undertake her fieldwork, she was back in her hometown, Manaus, the city from which she had been forced to flee due to death threats. At the time, her goal was to study the image of Guamiri Troari indigenous group produced by the Amazonian Press since the 1960s, when large economic projects were introduced in the region, affecting the group's way of life along the bank of the lower Rio Negro. A walk through downtown, however, changed her plans. In a moment that would shape her journey, Venenilde found herself in front of a house where a young indigenous child had lived 20 years earlier, a teenager who spent her days collecting candy papers and matchbox from the city streets. Searching for information about the young girl's fate, the writer learned of her death. From the security guard of the company that now occupied the house, Venenilde heard the phrase that would redefine her work. It would be very lesa in English, silly, to think about someone who had run off. Dead is dead, said the interlocutor. At that very moment, the writer decided that her research would have a new purpose. I quote again, to reflect on the experience of an indigenous child who collected packets took her own life at 17, and now lingers as a fragmented memory on a street where no one seems aware this ever happened. Close quotes. Rio sem fim, an endless river. Through the voice of an unnamed narrator, Rio sem fim tells the profound effects of a religious mission in the fictional São Joaquim da Cachoeira, located in the northern region of the state of Amazonas. The Catholic mission, which imposed the Portuguese language and Christian beliefs on the indigenous population, led to disintegration of local tradition and ways of life. The mission also orchestrated the relocation of young girls from the region to Manaus, where they were forced into domestic work for wealthy families. While centered in the geographical and temporal transit between the Alto Rio Negro and Manaus during the 1980s and 1990s, Rio Sem Fim extends its perspective to encompass an entire historical arc, spanning from the period following the economic decline in the Amazon caused by the collapse of the rubber boom to the so-called modern era when large economic conglomerates began to penetrate the region. Among many layers of meaning, the novel foregrounds storytelling as an indispensable tool for resisting colonialism and reimagining subjectivity. The novel challenged the reductive ontological frameworks, embodying a profound act of resistance and cultural redefinition. Not for nothing, thus, one of the opening scenes of Rio Sem Fim depicts the cathartic reaction of the indigenous people of São Joaquim da Cachoeira to their encounter with the colonialist cultural production. Outraged by the way they have been and continue to be portrayed by Western institutions of science and culture, the indigenous people set fire to books in one of the most powerful scenes in the contemporary Brazilian literature. To finish, I just want to highlight one final important point. Rio Sem Fim, by Venenilde Pereira, is a pioneer of a reality that, at the time of its creation, was just beginning to emerge in the cultural and literary landscapes in Brazil. Venenilde Pereira stands as the first writer to foreground a dual identity, both indigenous and Afro-descendant. And she is also the first one to bring an Afro-indigenous character to the center of a novel. In conclusion, like a seismograph that detects subterranean waves long before they reach the surface, Venenilde perceives the silence and hears the whispers of indigenous peoples displaced from the forest and marginalized in the cities, while we barely begin to notice the human and environmental disaster unfolding around us. In the Amerindian world, as anthropologist Eduardo Viveiros de Castro argues, a subject is not one who thinks of himself as a subject, but one who is thought of as a subject by another. By imagining her characters from the waters of her endless river, Venenilde Pereira challenged established beliefs and brought the marginalized peoples of the Amazon into a new world. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Boa tarde a todos. I want to thank Professor Vanessa Grossman for the invitation to present here the research that I made at Penn last year as a visiting scholar at Center for Latin Studies. My research is about Davi Kopenawa, The Falling Sky, Words of a Yanomami Shaman, and how this book produced a reimagining concepts for psychoanalysis. So, in his book, Cannibal Metaphysics, the anthropologist Eduardo Viveiros de Castro suggests that contemporary anthropology, which aims to disentangle itself from its colonial origins, should make a critique, a reflection, and an acknowledgement. For instance, anthropologists drew their principal concepts from the native people they study. And one of the principal questions of Viveiros de Castro's book is, quote, what do anthropologists owe conceptually to the people they study? He continues by saying, since every experience of another culture offers us an occasion to engage in experimentation with our own, in far more than imaginary variation, such a thing is the putting into variation our imagination. My research pursues this thought-provoking suggestion from Viveiros e Castro, studying the book The Falling Sky, Words of a Yanomami Shaman by Davi Kopenawa and Bruce Albert, as a source for imagining concepts not just for anthropology, but for philosophy and principally for psychoanalysis. I elaborate on how two Western concepts are generatively reimagined in Kopenawa's critique. First of all, about the notion of spirits or subjectivity, according to indigenous people, which for them and Kopenawa is not anthropocentric, but instead is anthropomorphic. Going away from the separation of subject object, for indigenous people and Kopenawa, all things have the general form of humans, and all things have spirits or are subjects. However, when we speak about selfhood, it is expected to be confused with the concept of ego. Indeed, Yanomamis do not confound the ego, the visible and social image of the body, with the subjectivity of the invisible image of the essence, the spirits. To avoid this confusion, they build ways to create an anti-narcissistic culture. Then, the first concept that we will reimagine is subjectivity. The second Western concept re-elaborated for Kopenawa's imagination is his critique of white culture, calling them, quote, the people of merchandise, and, quote, the people that just dream about themselves. In our vision, he critiques the consequence of the anthropocentric conception of subjectivity because the whites conceal themselves in a civilized and capitalist view of reality, which is materialistic and narcissistic. This re-evaluation of this concept of spirit, or if you prefer, of thinking, is urgent because anthropocentric blindness leads humanity to catastrophe. The negation of life and subjectivity to other humans and other beings, like plants, animals, and the environment, has resulted not only in the destruction of them to make money with meat, crops, and ores, as happening in Yanomami territory, but also the destruction of the planet and the white culture, menaced with the climate change and its insurmountable socio-political divisions. According to Yanomami cosmology, and more broadly in Amerindian thought, all spirits were human at the beginning of time, and they could metamorphose constantly. Later, these spirits lost this ability. Some turned into animals, while others settled in a proper human form. Therefore, all living beings are considered, in their essence, human. In this description, we can see an aspect strongly emphasized by Viveiros de Castro in his theory of perspectivism, where, according to Amerindian cosmology, all living beings have the general form of the human. Thus, according to the author, this spirit or culture is the general form of Amerindian thoughts. They think of nature as a social relation between different groups of living beings. Indigenous people are anthropomorphic, as they see all life forms as a type of culture and all beings as human. Forest animals have habits, behaviors that they see as a part of their culture, just as indigenous people, in their human bodies, have their traditions and customs. For them, the blood of jaguar's prey is beer for it. The peccary's mud is a ceremonial house for them. Every animal habit is like humans' traditions, rituals, hierarchies, and morals. Compared with white culture, we think there's only one nature, material, which we call objectivity, reality, and several distinct human cultures lie in their minds. So, since modernity, Western culture has been naturalistic, one nature for all beings, and multicultural, the belief that despite the same organic body, only humans have thinking, language, and culture in different ways. However, according with the indigenous cosmology, if the spirit, humanity, or culture is the standard form of thought of all living beings, the difference lies in the body. Therefore, Viveiros de Castro emphasized that perspectivism is a multinaturalism. Each body feels the forest and acts uniquely. Nature is perspectivized and therefore multiplied by the distinctive ways rooted in the body of each type of spirit. Each body has particular ways of affecting and being affected. The orange time when all beings were humans and became fixated in animal forms is a mythical speech transmitted orally. However, the shamans could see this time of orange and interact with these orange spirits, called chaperies, in the shamanic sessions. For this, the shamans blow yakuana powder, a powerful psychoactive substance, into each other's nostrils. Inhaling yakuana, the shamans can see the spirits in their original form, tiny, beautiful, bright human shapes, with the body decorated with paintings and feathers, singing and dancing, descending from the sky and mountains along their luminous pathways. Shining like blazing mirrors, these pathways crisscross the entire forest like a spider's web or suspended highways, along which they move swiftly. Observing the presentation dance of the luminous chaperies for a long time and listening to their songs and stories, the shamans can learn from them. Kopenawa constantly reaffirms throughout the book that his school is the forest, the dreams, and the shamanic sessions, where he listens and learns from the chaperies. Such teachings are engraved on the body and therefore not forgotten. As seen by the shaman, remembering, dreaming, and learning are processes of incorporation, where memory is fixed in the body so they do not forget easily. The strong anthropophagic character of this metaphysics is perceived here, where knowing is like devouring, making the other and difference immanent to oneself. Since the beginning, psychoanalysis has yielded essential contributions from indigenous traditions through the lens of anthropology and contributed to open new debates in this field. The classical work of 1913, Totem and Taboo, puts Freud into position of a vital interlocutor, but also brought many critiques to his limited anthropological conceptions, especially his more polemic conclusion that put the Oedipus complex as the origins of human society. However, beyond the Oedipus complex, the dialogue with anthropology also helped Freud to think of concepts for psychoanalysis like narcissism. In the most systematic texts about this concept, published just one year later in 1914, Freud defines narcissism as the result of libidinal investment in the ego that allows it to gain unification, becoming one of the objects to which the subject can direct your drives. In cases when this process involves too much libidinal investment, the subject can become psychotic, abandoning the external world by creating a new world with hallucinations and deliriums, losing the sense of integrity of the ego that becomes fragmented. Freud often interpreted indigenous society's knowledge in this direction, comparing animism and what he calls the omnipotence of thoughts with early childhood development or pathologic conditions. Recognizing that the most critical aspect of Freud's work in Thought and Taboo was not the objective validity of his conclusions, but the discovery of our modern myth, which works unconsciously despite the variable facts, Levi-Strauss compared in his famous text the effectiveness of symbols, the shamanic cures with the psychoanalytic cure. In both of them, the importance of the myth is crucial, but in the case of indigenous tradition, there is a collective myth that supports the ritual. In contrast, for our modern societies, the myth is individual, or familiar myth of the Oedipal complex. Levi-Strauss then affirms that the psychoanalyst is the shaman of our modern societies. In his myth conception helped Lacan develop the formulation in his text, the neurotic's individual myth. Once built through the narcissistic investments, the ego will be reinforced with many layers of identification. That's why so many psychoanalysts since Lacan used the example of an onion to describe it. Like an onion, the ego has many layers, but inside there is no kernel, just a void. Our ego is just the projection of our body surface and a collection of past identifications. Because of this fragility, we keep building new identifications to give it consistency. With Kopenawa's counter-anthropology, we see this psychoanalytical notion gain other contours. The shaman teaches us some aspects of his culture that are genuinely anti-narcissistic and anti-Oedipal strategies. These strategies help Yanomami people to be outside the logic of narcissism and the Oedipal complex without becoming psychotic or fragmented. One aspect of Kopenawa's anti-narcissistic and anti-Oedipal strategies concerns the images and the mirrors. The mirrors have an extraordinary significance in the book The Falling Sky. It's what the pathway of the Shapiros are made of. The image for them is spirit. They don't have a unified ego through the identification with an image produced in the mirror stage, but a multiplicity of images that dance with other multiplicities, the Shapiris. Their unification came from social relations with many entities, all as human as themselves. They also think that everyone has their own image or spirits. However, they believe its image spirit, Utupe in Yanomami, is related to every moment with many other spirits. We can think that for them the unconscious is a place of multiplicity of images, which is not so different from the Freudian perspective. Another similarity is that for psychoanalysis, the unconscious is untimely, a time that does not pass, like the time of oranges in American thought. And again, for Freud, in the book The Interpretation of Dreams, the unconscious is formed by images and words. The crucial difference, of course, is the nature of the images and the words. While the Yanomami see in their dreams and shamanic sessions images and words from the forest, the spirits of the forest, whites see in their dreams the image of their civilization, family, society, and merchandise. If for the Yanomami shaman, seeing and listening to their spirits is essential to learning, in white culture in general, seeing and listening to others' perspectives in our unconscious is dangerous, could be a sign of schizophrenia. Repressing the multiplicity in our subjectivity leads us to reaffirm the identity of the visible image, the ego. And since then, the ego is the place of a narcissism. Our culture valorizes one image, the visible one, the ego's image. As Lacan states, narcissism is the source of unfamiliarity, ignorance, and aggressiveness. So, we can better understand Kopenawa's critique of white culture as full of forgetfulness, fixation on themselves, and greed for merchandise. I have other things to talk about, but we don't have time, so thanks so much for the effort.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Carolina Angel Botero. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Latin American Studies here at Penn. And I'm going to take you to a very different place. We're going to be talking about the rights of nature, and we're going to be talking about law and other things. So the name of this presentation is Nature in Brackets, incorporating the Amazon into the rights of nature. So this talk builds on my experience attending COP16 on the which is the Conference of the Parties for the Convention on Biological Diversity in Cali in past October. And I hope it also brings light to what's going to happen with COP30 in Manaus in Brazil this November. So Nature in Brackets is the title of this presentation, and it refers to the process of clearing the text in brackets to mirror multilateral negotiations where the politics over the grammatical use of words occur. So during a COP, this is like what happened during any COP. During a COP, local organizations, international bodies, artists, academics, business community members, and diverse array of stakeholders gather to explore the future of nature, at least in terms of biodiversity COP, I mean. The discussions are divided into technical and multilateral political negotiations where the parties work to clarify the text of the agreement. This process involves reviewing the draft text, which is clearing the brackets. So that's the name of this presentation. And examine how different grammatical choices and writing styles can lead to varying understandings of nature and the economic futures. In multilateral negotiations, square brackets show draft text that has not been agreed in principle and still open for negotiation. This is referred to as a blue zone event where the primary discussions occur. In parallel, in what is known as the green zone, other stakeholders present their aspirations for the future of nature and biodiversity conservation. Some participants engage in debates over royalties for the use of genetic information, while others propose plans and models for the more sustainable use of biodiversity. Additionally, at least for this COP, there were conversations focused on integrated nature into legal frameworks and recognizing natural entities as legal subjects and as subject of rights. So at the Chamber of Commerce in Cali, next to the Green Zone event, local indigenous leaders, the Colombian Minister of Environment, and the Director for the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature came together to present the Declaration of the Rights of the Amazon. This builds on a prior decision from the Colombian Supreme Court that recognized the Amazon as a subject of rights. Within the allotted time, I will aim to respond to the questions posed in the brackets. What does it mean to recognize the Amazon as a subject of rights, and what does nature signify under this perspective? So, framing the Amazon as a subject of rights. As I listened to the proceedings around me, I felt strong disconnect between the grammatical discussions we engage in during the 2 weeks and the realities encompassed by, by a concept like nature. The ongoing debate over wording may appear tedious, locked in an endless cycle of semantic negotiation. Still, it is essential to understand that each term carries substantial weight. They represent funding distributions, mechanism for public involvement, developmental initiatives, and local legislation. This brings up the question I'm exploring. How does framing the Amazon as a subject of rights influence our perception and understanding of it? This perspective can significantly affect how we engage with and respond to the pressing environmental challenges we face today. To explore this question, I will first explain the concept of nature in relation to the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Rights of Nature movement, and finally I will use the case of the Amazon as a lens for this discussion. So, the Kunming-Montreal Global Diversity Framework, I'm gonna go with you very slowly so you all gonna understand how this works, was adopted during the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, I mean COP15, and serves as the most recent international framework guiding our relationship with nature. It is the action plan for implementing the objectives of the Convention of the for the Convention on Biological Diversity over the coming decade. So prior to this, we had another program, another action plan, and this one is the newest one. So this is like what is leading international negotiations over nature. After 4 years of discussions, the framework outlines 4 goals for 2050 and 23 targets for 2030. These guidelines are designed to complement the Sustainable Development Goals and build on previous strategic plans. But how is nature addressed within the GBF? So we're getting technical here. It's not that bad. Section C, 7B, 1 of 7B of the GBF defines nature in relation to different value systems, recognizing that nature holds various meanings for different people. It emphasizes that these perspectives are crucial for human well-being. In October 2023, discussions about the value of nature took place in Nairobi. These talks focused on reviewing the report from the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, which is a technical body that assists the convention, which addressed the diverse values of nature and the methods for assessing them. So, the values of nature can be understood through 4 key perspectives as outlined in the report. So the first one is living from nature, which focuses on how nature provides essential resources such as food, water, and overall well-being. This perspective aligns closely with section C7b, which highlights nature's contributions to human life. Then we have living in nature, which emphasizes the cultural and personal significance of nature. The third one is living with nature, that recognizes the interconnectedness of all living things. And finally is living as part of nature, which views humans as integral component of natural world, promoting a holistic relationship that values nature beyond its material benefits. This perspective fosters a sense of kinship and interdependence among all living beings. So, declaring the Amazon as a subject of rights aims to operate within this last category as a being as part of nature. Legal scholar Geoffrey Graver explains the rights of nature is a transformative norm, and I quote, that establishes a new paradigm for the world system, one that integrates human societies and consequently states with ecosystems. So, to clear the bracket, nature refers specifically to the natural world, which is made distinct from the human world. Whether we live within, in, from, or part of it, all these perspectives on valuing nature necessitate a separation for clarity. This separation creates a clear way to understand our past and present relationships with nature. In the context of the rights of nature this framework necessitates rethinking how we articulate our understanding of nature. Typically, this involves shifting the focus of protection from human interests to those of the natural world, a perspective known as the ecocentric view. So, to better understand this concept, let's examine the Amazon as a case study in the rights of nature. So, the rights of nature are expressed in the national context through primary avenues, the legislative measures and the judicial measures. And this, particularly in Latin America, we have all these court decisions. So in 2018, we had the Colombian Supreme Court deciding over granting rights to the Amazon as a holder of rights, and and the idea was benefiting future generations who will be most affected by climate change. One of the main reasons the judge in this case granted rights to the Amazon was recognizing the effects that destructing the Amazon could have serious consequences for future generations. And so the judge urged the Colombian government to develop a plan to combat climate change and deforestation. For the judge, the Amazon symbolizes the core of wilderness. Referring back to the value categories defined by IPBES, it is not only about living in, with, or as part of nature, but rather about living from nature. This perspective highlights the rights of the future generations to a healthy environment, as well as the rights to live, health, food, and water, which will be provided by the Amazon. In this case, the ecocentric shift changed the nature of rights holders to, but overlooked the aspiration to integrate human societies with ecosystems. The concept of embeddedness as an aspiration for shifting paradigm in law aligns with the perspective presented, for example, by professor at the New School Hugh Raffles in his book In Amazonia, published in 2002, where he highlights a deep and specific connection between location and social life, emphasizing that place, much like class, race, and gender, forms a fundamental social relationship. And like have been showed throughout the day by the very many presenters, all these relationships. In this sense, the idea of granting rights to the Amazon for the sake of the future generations presents a distant view and a neglect of the historical context of how this region was formed, not to mention the political and economic challenges it currently faces. So this process of becoming of the place remains unaccounted for in the rights of nature, because it fails to capture that places are never still and they're never finished. Instead, like people, they're always in process, always in the flow of becoming, always on the move. It comes together and disperses constantly in the service of particular projects. And how does it serve this new project of writing it into the rights of nature? So during the COP, as we were having this event on the declaration of declaring the Amazon as a right of nature, Natalia Green, the director of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, addressed the audience, emphasizing that these declarations serve as a call to the world to recognize the Amazon as a threatened biome. However, and I ask, how does the term biome fully capture the dynamic reality of the Amazon? Perhaps not. The goal aligns closely with the approach taken by the Colombian Supreme Court, as it primarily highlights its ecological contributions. While recognizing the existence of life of indigenous communities, the Declaration on Preserving the Integrity of the Amazon stands in contrast with the idea as a place that fosters social relationships. So before presenting this declaration in Cali, various Amazonian indigenous groups convened in Bogota to sign a mutual agreement aimed to protecting life. This shift from focusing solely from a biome to recognizing the protection of life raises the question of how we can reframe our understanding of nature. 2 minutes and I'm done. It emphasizing the importance of relationships and recognizing the vibrant life of the Amazon, which includes economic activities and aspirations, as well as significant disturbances caused by, for example, the pursuit of minerals. In the last of exercise of clearing the brackets, I would like to highlight a note from a text by Cristina Lyons, which provides an ethnographic account detailing efforts to communicate this project in the Colombian Amazon. I believe it addresses a crucial point that has not been given enough attention within the rights of nature movement. Due to time, I will rephrase her ideas in my own words, and I hope not to alter the essence of the original text. And she explains, addressing rights of nature issues in the Amazon could improve socio-environmental conflicts rather than escalating them violently or merely managing them if done in the presence of regional inhabitants. Feminist philosopher Isabel Stenger advocates for bettering conflicts, which involves slowing down our assumptions about understanding the problems at hand. This means resisting the urge to quickly resolve the difference through superficial tolerance, which can overlook important perspectives and realities. Key questions arise, she says. How can we recognize voices that have been marginalized? How can we foster dialogue without the need for complete agreement? So I'm closing here. So the call for bettering conflicts aligns closely with the idea of living as part of nature. This sentiment reflects what indigenous communities gathered in Bogota before COP16 referred to as a commitment to protect life. While this aspiration is embraced by with the rights of nature movement, the understanding of what the Amazon represents differs among the groups involved. Writing nature into law tends to establish a specific understanding of what nature is and how it should be preserved over time. Conservation of biomes or maintaining conditions for future generations reflects a particular environmentally focused view of the Amazon and what is necessary for its protection. But incorporating nature into legal rights goes beyond the ecological goals. This approach does not fully acknowledge the evolving character of places, and it fails to address conflicts effectively as if it includes inhabitants of the Amazon from the very definition of nature. Our focus should be on protecting life itself, rather than only ensuring the conditions for the proper functioning of ecosystems. Thank you.
I was thinking about, I had a paper on race, and then yesterday I just thought I had to throw it away because it didn't make sense. I wanted to talk about film, so I'm talking by the heart. I didn't prepare anything. I just throw the other thing away, and then I wrote something today. Well, I just want to thank you, the invitation. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Fernando. And well, I decided to speak by the heart most of the part because I think we are already dead, and maybe we have to return to heart and body as part of knowledge, and that's what I'm trying to do right now. Yesterday, someone asked me, because my film, it's no more history without us. And someone asked me, who is us? And I said, us Amazonian people. For me, it's okay. It's a category that exists, like the people that live in the Amazon. Not only indigenous, like my friend. We are people from, my family is from the rubber business, and we are from Acre. And we are very different people. We're very diverse. So I wanted to bring this category that's dangerous sometimes and not very well accepted category of people, like Amazonian people, people from the Amazon, as we live in this region and feel like this region is our home. Coming back home is coming back to the Amazon. So this sort of thing. Well, us as Amazonians, like diverse, misunderstood, and silenced, us who call this region home, us who have the forest as our place of belonging and return, us, the people who don't belong anywhere else. We belong to it. And we are kind of tired, I think. We've heard like the government representative today, and I was kind of disappointed with that because it's been a tough year. We are hosting a COP30 in my city, Belém, and we have seen all sorts of absurd narratives emerge. Mining companies have dominated the entire discourse of the conference, and we find ourselves cursed at this time. Today, indigenous leaders have been occupying the Pará Department of Education for 25 days, fighting against a government that wants to remove teachers from indigenous territories and replace them with computers connected to Starlink satellites. This would give Elon Musk control of all indigenous metadata, where the indigenous people are, which parts of their territory they access, where their resources are located. Essential information for defining a new invasion. In a world that continues to operate this way over the forest, I often wonder what about my role as a researcher and a filmmaker. In a world where indigenous communities have to block highways to demand the most basic rights, what should my films be about? What's the point of a cinema and research if I don't stop the roads and the structures with them? And in this context, I want to pose a question that I ask myself almost every day. Why do I make films? Why do we make films? What's the purpose of an Amazonian cinema? What's it for? Honestly, my friends, the films made so far haven't served our local resistances that much. They haven't expanded the debate on what we are going through and how we've been rapidly destroyed. They haven't shown everyone who we really are, know what we really think, what stresses us. Well, the other day I was attending a screening of a film by Indigenous director Kimika Kaseje in Europe. His film spoke about the risks and threats surrounding the indigenous land. And a European woman just stood up and suggested he should stop making films on with political things. And she said it was not cinematographic enough. And she suggested his film should be about abstract things and focus on rituals and spirituality. This is the cinema the world wants to assign to Amazonian people. Does the world want to relearn how to deal with time and anxiety? I think yes. Does the world want to reclaim senses it has lost? Does the white world want to learn a new way of living? Probably. The question is about them all the time and never about us. Are we here to serve the world again, as it has always been? Is this new Amazonian cinema for them or for us? And if this cinema does not show the bleeding of our land, what is it for? Why do we Amazonians continue to make films if they do not help if they don't help our resistances. The truth is even worse, my friends. When a film helps our resistances, it's no longer considered cinema, because cinema has never been about resistance. Cinema has always been a civilizational instrument, an instrument of domination, of educating the other, of whitening. Resistance has never been considered cinematographic. But what is cinematographic? And whom does the concept serve? Does the European white cinematic language serve us today to build an Amazonian cinema? The cinema industry, the festivals, the streaming platforms, dominated by white men and their cinematographic language, who they really serve? What kind of cinema can serve truly to us Amazonians? Certain things, my friends, we should no longer accept. The film I bring here today was blocked in many parts of the global north. It divided creators in the United States and Europe. The film had its premiere in Indonesia, and had it not been for that, the film might never have been screened. Because in the film industry, if a film doesn't happen very quickly, it's simply replaced by another. And this one came very close to never existing. But Indonesia, a country on the other side of the world, also facing destruction on its tropical forests and on the invisibilization of its people, understood what I was trying to say in this film. And only after that, the film went to Brazil, and then to Europe, and then the United Nations events, and only now, like months after, we have arrived here in America. We must never forget that major festivals blocked this film. Even every single one of them, actually, controlled and directed by white men. The most important documentary festival, film festival in Brazil never screened this film. Instead, they choose to screen an award, a film that followed exactly the opposite trajectory of this film. My film goes from the Amazon to the European archives, and the film they awarded was, again, a film about an astro researcher retracing natural expeditions to Brazil 2,000 years later. Again and again, the same thing. This film, directed by a Southern Brazilian, opens with an indigenous person being taken to Vienna to thank the German institution for preserving Munduruku artifacts stolen in the 19th century. Then it shows the National Museum of Brazil in flames, one of the greatest tragedies of our country's history. Brazil, it suggests, lacks the capacity to receive or care for these artifacts. So thank you, Austria. The film was made and supported and received financial support from the Austrian institution. Well, this film that I'm talking about, it presents hundreds and hundreds of animals and plants that were collected by nature. But shows in all 90 minutes, there is not a single word about the human remains in the collection. We, Amazonian researchers, we know those human remains are there, but it doesn't appear in the film. So where are the Amazonian body parts in this film that was awarded? And why they have disappeared on the narrative? Would the indigenous person have applauded the museum if he knew how many human skulls it still holds? I don't think so. So I ask again, who is interested in this kind of cinema? Can we call it decolonized? Can we call a cinema decolonized if it disregards everything global South intellectuals have been writing for the last 30 years? Who benefits from this cinema? Well, we have to find a way, my friend Fernando, to unlearn how to make films. Thank you.